Hello, Michael.
Hey Bart, how's it going?
How's it going, Michael? I know that you weren't on, I think, on the earlier part of the call, but we did have a call from a lady that was playing 2-5, and I know this is a 5-5 setup that dealt with a very large open size. And I remember from your email that there was something here similar. Now, this one was played from Hollywood Park. Is that right?
Yeah, Hollywood Park. This is so the structure at Hollywood Park for 5-5 is a 300 to 500 buy-in, so it's
Right.
usually decently short stacked, but at this point in the night we were going for a while and the table had all agreed to just do mandatory straddle.
Okay.
So it was actually a 5-5-10.
5-5-10. All right. That's going to make a huge, huge difference because I remember there was an open size to 35 here. But, people ask me about LA games. And there's different setups for $5 blind LA games. This is at least if they haven't changed anything. And what I mean by that is that like at the Bike and Hustler, it's a 1K cap. But then at Commerce and Hollywood Park, it's a 500 cap. So it's a really sort of short game. But the best games usually, and I loved playing, we played this 5-10 mandatory 25 game with a 2,500 cap back in the day at Hollywood Park during the day. It was unbelievable. Usually the best games in LA are at Hollywood Park. They are the ones that are filled with the most recreational players. It's kind of a shit show over there. Like the floor guys don't know what the fuck is going on. You'll get jumped in the list. You got to be very, very super village. You got to figure out, you can't just be laid back. It's not necessarily in the best area. And then of course, the problem here though, too, with these games is the drop eats you alive. I mean, it's still a beatable game, but it's just the drop is a huge, huge part of this game. Regular 5-5, 500 where they're dropping flat like $7 is just crazy. But this is awesome. I mean, I don't know how deep you are, but to get a game with these players at 5-5-10 is just, what a dream spot.
This game was pretty action. Usually it's one way or another with that game. Usually I play the 5-10, which is a 500 to 2,500 buy-in. It was a little tough that night, so I decided to just drop down. And the game I got in was pretty action, and people were rebuying. The good, it's a good and a bad thing with the short stacks is what happens is a lot of people, because you're playing 100 blinds deep, get in very quickly. So
right.
For people who are willing to continue to rebuy, stacks kind of get bigger and bigger depending on the game. But sometimes people buy in 500 once, they lose, and then they just get up and it gets short. Or if somebody wins a big pot, they'll just get up and leave, which is, the classic hit and run in LA.
And I've made tweets about this, and I've talked about it in some of my material, and some, Euros get all mad at me when I say this, but this is the best example of when I sometimes say, if you're playing in a heavily restricted buy-in game, sometimes it is okay to take a slightly negative EV play, meaning you make a call on a draw where you lose a few percent, and you're losing a few percent in that particular pot, but overall it's plus EV, and it's not an image factor of like making it look like you're gambling. It's because if you lose, you're going to rebuy, so you're getting more money on the table. And if the other guy loses, now all of a sudden you have a bunch of money, which goes towards your image, and maybe the other guy rebuys. We had an old content creator, David Chan. Shout out to David Chan, if everybody knows who he was. He would talk about these things because he cut his teeth at Hollywood Park and also at Hawaiian Gardens, which was a $600 buy-in structure. Check this out. He would propose red-black flips to players in the game because he knew that it would get more money on the table. So in a 500, it's whatever you can do to get more money on the table. So I thought that was a cool little life hack. How deep are you in this hand, by the way? What are the effective stacks?
About $2,000 in front of me at that point. I covered the table.
Okay.
The two villains in the hand will be the hijack and the straddle, which are, the hijack was about $700 effective, and the straddle was about $1,200. Most of the stacks, I would say, were in the $1,200 to $1,500 range at that point.
Okay.
To get started on the hand, so it folds around to the hijack, 700 effective. He raises to 35. I had been 3-betting him in position a lot. I was on the button. I decided not to 3-bet, so I ended up just calling on the button.
What do you have?
I have ace deuce of hearts.
Okay, so ace deuce of hearts. So now obviously it's a straddle, you're playing 5-5-10. So it's 35. It's not a crazy open. What I would say, as I had talked about with the previous caller on the live stream, Melinda, is because you will see this sometimes at Hollywood Park. Let's say that you weren't playing 5-5-10. Let's say you were just playing 5-5, right? and a guy, and even if the hijack had 700, but I think it's easier to look at, say the hijack had like 500 or 600. Let's say he raised to 35 at 5-5, a 7x open. What would you do with ace deuce of hearts on the button?
I'd probably fold.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of getting at. When people make these gigantic live pre-flop raises, you can just best hand them. You have no incentive in a non-anteed game to really enter. Now, obviously, this is a different setup. So you decide to call on the button with ace deuce of hearts, the worst suited ace. Now, I will say, as I always say in my training material, you are definitely incentivized to be more aggressive in a spot where you would do some calling on the button. In a 3-blind setup, there's more of a chance that someone's going to call. So I probably would have played this one as a 3-better. I think I'm probably playing most hands here on the button as a 3-better fold, maybe most of the time, but I don't think it's criminal. So so it sounds to me like the straddle called because you gave his stack, right? Is that right?
Yeah. The straddle calls 1200, about 1200 in a stack. So flop comes out, deuce, deuce, 10, rainbow.
Wow.
Yeah. And it straddle check, the original raiser and the hijack checks. I bet 40 and about 1/3 pot. Both players call. So
I had the pot at about 105, but maybe it's like 110. So it gets checked to you. You bet 40, which is just over 1/3. And I think that that's a fine sizing because most of the time, people in live poker, when they raise and they flop top pair or better, are going to bet. So the fact that the hijack doesn't bet usually is indicative that he does not have a 10 or better. So obviously the straddle is entirely unknown, right? And he can have all the 10. I mean, you don't have a 10, so it's not like there's less combos of it. But you don't want to go crazy large in a given situation and just get like small pairs and stuff to fold out. So I have no problem with that. So you go 40, okay?
Yeah, both players call.
So straddle and the hijack call. And the reason why that raises my eyebrows a little bit is just because of, if you agree with what I'm saying in terms of the hijacks, for the fact that he didn't bet, right?
100%. Yeah.
So he didn't bet, so he doesn't have a 10 or better. It's like, what is he overcalling with? Because you think about it, it's like, well, does he have like 8s or 9s? But even still, that's not like the best overcall. It would be way different if you just bet and the straddle folded and then the hijack called. I mean, he could have ace high, right? But this guy's not supposed to be overcalling with those types of hands because of the multi-way nature. Now, when I say supposed to, I mean, when you're trying to think about reasonable stuff, I mean, you obviously see some outlier crazy stuff like at this level, but it's just something of note. Okay, so 230 to the turn.
Turn is the jack of spades. So brings in a backdoor flush draw, so 2 spades on the board.
Okay.
Checks to me again, and I thought about it for a while, thinking maybe somebody has jack 10 or maybe called with some kind of, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw. I bet 180.
See, I was going to say, I mean, obviously it's possible, right? Someone can have jack 10, right? I mean, that's possible. Now, the whole backdoor thing, again, to look at this logically, neither player really should have a backdoor hand. And the reason why that is because the straddle is calling next to act with a guy behind him, and the hijack who checked the flop shouldn't be overcalling with a backdoor hand either because the straddle called in the middle. So again, different from heads up, where you will see more backdoor hands represented, I'm saying there shouldn't really be backdoor hands represented in this particular setup. For those reasons, I would have thought that this was a bad card for you because it's an overcard to a 10.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was also kind of scared of jacks maybe, but I was thinking that the hijack would be betting all that, all over pairs.
Well, when I say bad card, I mean bad card in the sense that you're not going to get as much value, and it will probably demand a smaller bet size. Whereas if the turn was a 4, then you could probably bet larger. So I personally would have gone smaller here, maybe 75 to 100, just because I don't want to drive a 10 out of the hand.
Yeah,
and I think that the straddle, and I think that the hijack has maybe a lot of these like kind of shitty, pocket pair types of holdings, but
definitely, yeah, it makes sense. It definitely crossed my mind that 8s, 9s, 7s, 8s, 9s, but So I ended up betting 180.
Now, if you want to make the case that you still think the straddle's going to call with a 10 anyways, and you want to build a pot to cooler like another deuce from the straddle, that you could make that case. But okay, so you go 180.
180. Both call again.
What?
Yeah.
Straddle and hijack call. So, I mean, I know it's hard to, so it's 540 here on the turn. So the pot is 770. I mean, I know it's hard to answer this question, but I'll ask it anyways. Would you ever think the hijack is, for some reason, checking an overpair here on this flop? That is not a common MO in LA to see people like check aces or kings, you know?
I considered it. I definitely considered it. I really at the time, I was thinking in my head, on a deuce 10 board, I can't see him really checking, to be scared of any kind of deuce or, three ways especially, I feel like he would be betting all aces, kings, queens, jacks, etc. But then when he called the second time in position, it crossed my mind that he may have checked back or checked on the flop with queens or kings or aces, maybe jacks, and he turned a boat. But it didn't, in my opinion, if he turned jacks from the previous just history I had with during that night, he'd be raising jacks on the turn at least, right?
Well, here's the interesting part of this hand. So kind of like interesting variables. What I was going to say was that if you bet, like you said, 180, right? And then the straddle called, and then the hijack folded out. And then, instead of the pot being 770, the pot was like, just under 600. And let's say that the river was like a total brick, like a 4 or a 5, and he checked you again. I would make a value bet targeting a 10, which would not be that large if the straddle was the only one that called the turn. But now that both of these guys have called again, if the river bricks out like a 4 or a 5, I am betting large because it seems to me logically that the hijack has to have something here, and you're up against two people. So my sizing would be larger because I think I'm going to get called by one of these guys, maybe the hijack who's checking an overpair. So if the river's like a 4, I might bet like 500-600. But if it were heads up where the straddle had called twice, I would bet smaller in the given spot. So okay, so 770, 10 deuce jack, hero with ace deuce of hearts, bets twice and gets called twice. Okay.
River comes offsuit queen.
Offsuit queen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The backdoor flush draw misses, and the river is a queen.
Huh. Okay. So 10 deuce jack queen. Okay.
Checks to me. I thought about this.
So before you tell us, so checks to you now. So we talked about how maybe, what would make sense here, even though it's kind of weird, is that the hijack has an overpair. Now, obviously, queen, he could have queen, so he makes queens full, right? I mean, there's only 3 combos of that. By the way, the hijack now, after you bet, really only has less than 500 left in the pot, right? But he still can have aces and kings, though. He still can have aces and kings, and it's way more likely that he has aces and kings than queen. Now, you have an ace in your hand, so I guess that would mean that there's 3 combos of ace, there's 3 combos of king that you beat. Excuse me, 6 combos of king. So there's 9, the ace and the king variety. That's 9 combos. And then there's 3 combos of queen you lose to because there's a queen out there. And then another hand that we haven't really entirely considered here, Michael, that actually might make sense here for this guy is like the thick nuts. And what I mean by that is what's the flop thick nuts? Then would be 10-10, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he plays 10-10 this way. So you've got like 3 combos of queen, 3 combos of 10-10, and then you've got 9 combos of king, and 6 combos of king, and then 3 combos of ace because you have an ace in your hand. So I still see you ahead more often than you're behind if we're doing sort of the range analysis correctly. It's interesting because the straddle could still just have a 10. He didn't know that the hijack was going to overcall again. So I hate to lose money here by checking behind because I still think you're ahead of ace and king. There is another hand here that might creep in though, maybe from the hijack that you're now losing to, which maybe is, does he ever overcall the flop with ace king that he checked?
Yeah.
So
exactly my thoughts on the dot. everything that you said, not only the ace, king, 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 ace, king, I thought, or maybe 9-8. Somehow he makes some kind of donkey float on the flop.
A backdoor. Some people are saying backdoor 9-8. Now the other thing too about, you could still have the best hand here a lot just against a 10 against like one of these guys, and someone else is going to fold out. But the run out is a problem for you, not just because you can lose now, but now that it's more unlikely that a 10 can call, right? Mm-hmm. It's another overcard to a 10. So you have to take that into account as well. Because if you say, all right, now a 10's not going to call me. And yeah, like he has 6 combos of queen, queen and 10, 10, and he's got 9 combos of king, king in an ace. But does he ever creep in here with ace, king some of the time, like 2 of the 16 combos of ace, king? It starts to get closer. And if you can't get value from 10x, I guess I could see sometimes checking this one back, but my God, if that guy only has 500 left, first of all, I'm not concerned about the straddle at all. And then, but then you also have the other times, Michael, too, that you want a cooler a deuce from the straddle. So I think that will point me towards betting, right? Because your kicker is going to play with ace deuce unless he's boated up. So I think it's close, but I think I still bet, and I probably in my bet size is probably, I want to take a bet size that's going to put the original pre-flop raiser all in. So whatever that is that like 500 or something?
Yeah, around 500. I think it's like 445.
Okay.
So my thoughts were, in terms of bet sizing, was, I really wasn't worried about the straddle.
Right. And you shouldn't be. You just want to get max value though from him having a deuce though. That's the only thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I thought I ended up betting 300. I had considered checking. I looked at the hijack stack. I looked at the straddler stack, and I said, I'll bet 300.
Yeah, but that's the only thing that I have a small issue then with. But do you see what I'm saying? I think your sizing should put the hijack all in.
Yes, absolutely.
Because not only are you going to get extra value from a cooler deuce versus the straddle, but you want to get that money in versus aces and kings from the other guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. So I ended up betting 300. I was really close to checking. I felt like it was close. I was trying to figure out, would he really call me with aces and kings? And then I really thought about it, and I said, he thinks he's beating, any kind of 2 pair that I hit or something like that. And, I had been pretty active, so I think he would have called with aces and kings.
One other thing too here, Michael, though, too, is we're saying, well, what if he creeps in here with ace king, right?
Yeah.
Well, if he can sometimes creep in here with ace king, can he sometimes creep in here with ace queen that you're going to get called off as well, right? From the hijack. So it points me towards bet. Plus it's Hollywood Park.
Yeah. With Hollywood Park, you really never know.
So you bet 300. Okay, what happened?
I bet 300. The straddler thinks about it for a pretty long while. Looks back at his cards, looks at me, looks at the hijack, is kind of visibly frustrated. He's, going back, counting out the chips, thinking about it. And I just kept thinking to myself, what does this guy have? And he ends up side folding.
So straddle folds, okay.
He kind of holds his hand to the side. And then the hijack starts talking to himself, and he says, do you really have 10s full? What can you have? What can you have? What can you have? And just thinking about it, kind of huffs and puffs and just goes, if you got it, I guess you got it. And then shoves all in for another 140 or so.
So oh geez. So
yeah. So I put myself in that spot.
So what is it? So it's what? It's 15-10, 140 for you to call?
Yeah. And I just said,
well, you just forget about, you don't want to fold getting 10-1 no matter what. Right. Yeah.
I'm never good here after that speech, and everybody kind of laughed. And I just, I put in the 100. I said, I'm never folding for 140. I put in the 100. He shows ace king of spades.
So he did have ace king.
Yeah, he floated with 2 back doors. The straddle ended up turning over queen jack for top 2.
Oh, I was going to say that maybe the straddle's got like 2 pair that he wow, queen, he called on the flop with queen jack?
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm talking about.
That's Hollywood Park for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for 145 more. Yeah, I mean, that's... So again, like I said, when we do this logical hand reading, I went through the logical hand reading of why these guys shouldn't have backdoor hands. I mean, they're not supposed to have them, but they might show up with them. The guy ended up turning ace king of spades, so he turned the nut flush draw.
Exactly.
Backdoor. And it's also interesting to note too, like, so say for example, the hijack did fold off on the turn. I don't think you're going to get a fold from the straddle with queen jack if you bet the river.
I think he calls. Yeah.
But I think with the guy behind him, he was just like, what is going on in this hand, right? Because it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Because you always got to be concerned about that guy having 10-10, I think, too.
It was definitely a possibility. It definitely crossed my mind when I was thinking about betting the river. Does he ever have 10-10 and is just slow playing the whole way?
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see him slow playing. There had been a decent amount of action. I had been giving a lot of action. And I think he would have just, kind of stuck the money in with a shorter stack.
Yeah. That's, I mean, you can never fold the end. You should not be thinking about this 10-1. I think the interesting part of this hand is like what we went through. Like, is the river a bet? Is the river ever a check back, right? In a given spot.
That was my main kind of question about do you ever check back there or?
And again, it's a function of not just that you can lose, but it's a function of you make checkbacks in these situations when the calling hands that you're targeting are become weaker because of the board. So we were always talking about 10x, like it just becomes harder and harder for 10x to call three straights, coupled with the fact that now you can lose. That's when you started thinking about checking back in given situations. But thanks for the call, Michael. I know you had just emailed us this afternoon on that one.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.